you may end up coming up with some very erroneous conclusions. If you take what is the important factor? Here's an example. Consider the risk for a Swedish citizen, aged 30 to 45. 1, to get a severe cold during the next 12 months. 2, to become infected with the HIV virus during the same time period. Which is the biggest risk? Well, most people will say the biggest risk is the number 1 here. To get a severe cold during the next 12 months. But then you ask, which risk is it more important to be protected from? And of course, that's number 2. So the demand for risk mitigation or control of the risk is much, much larger for number 2 than for number 1. And that in spite of the fact that number 1 is a larger risk. So risk is not driving, in this case at least, risk is not driving the demand for risk control or risk mitigation. It's something else. And that something else is severity of consequences. And our research has shown that risk and probability of harm are closely related. Severity of harm, how bad it would be, and demand for risk reduction are closely related. Risk and demand for risk reduction are only moderately related. Some people have called that probability neglect. People think about consequences, not so much about probability. In risk communication, it should therefore be clear that the public wants to hear about severity of consequences, not so much about probabilities. Probability is hard to understand. Precise estimates of very small probabilities must rely on many assumptions and are seldom very credible. They can be challenged and usually are. It is therefore important in risk perception research to broaden the scope and not to study just risk, but also other dimensions such as consequences, severity of consequences. Affect and emotions. That's another important theme in risk perception research. Affect is a word which has several distinct meanings. It could refer to emotions, or it could refer to values and attitudes. And it's very important to make that distinction because they are psychologically quite different. Emotions, that's one thing. Values, attitudes, that's another thing. Both are related to risk perception, though. Here's a study I did quite some time ago concerning nuclear risk and nuclear waste risk. I had some data on trust, social trust. I had data on general risk sensitivity, and I had attitude data. That is attitude to nuclear power. And you see, attitude to nuclear power is the most important factor here. So this is results implying or showing how important the affect in that sense is. However, that's not the same as emotion. I had another study where I had people rate how they reacted emotionally to the concept of a nuclear waste repository in their neighborhood. Both negative and positive emotions were rated. About 800 people in 2 candidate municipalities, some control data and national sample as well. And here you see that attitude to the repository is most strongly related to the emotion factors. Both negative and positive emotions are important. Epistemic trust seems to be important. Risk to the municipality, attitude to nuclear power. Social trust, on the other hand, has a more marginal, plays a more marginal role here. It struck me then that in the traditional instructions, when people are asked to rate dread, how dreadful it would be, for example, to have a nuclear waste repository, it's not specified to whom the dread should be rated. Now, if it's your own emotional reaction, and here you have a number of emotion ratings, you see that there is quite strongly related to the attitude to nuclear power. But the anticipated emotional reactions of others is almost unrelated to attitude. And you have to be very clear about how you specify the instructions. Should it be the emotions that you yourself feel, or should it be the emotions you anticipate or guess that others will have? It's your own emotions that's the important thing. The emotions of others is not so important for your attitude. And also people rate other people's emotional reactions as much stronger than their others. I have a student who did some work on how people in authorities view the emotional reactions of themselves and others, and of course they say the same thing, that the public will be very emotional, there will be panic, etc., etc. But we, of course, are not like that. We can handle it, and we are, cool about what's going to happen. So the same thing as in this experiment. Yeah, that's what I just said. So you have to be very careful about whose reaction to talk about. Well, specific and current emotional reactions do seem to explain much of attitudes and policy behavior. And these results should be compared with the almost zero importance of anticipated dread of others. Both positive and negative emotions are important, and worry also contributes beyond the effect of fear. Anger seems to be more important than fear in policy contexts. Now, experts make quite different risk judgments than the public. And earliest work claimed that experts are objective and not at all affected by the same factors as seem to be important for the public. Now, later work has shown that the experts who were selected for their expertise in a specific field actually had similar structure of risk perception, but a lower level. They saw smaller risk, but if you look at how these risks correlated with various causal factors, you find that the structure was similar. We also found that the important thing seems to be the field of responsibility. An expert can rate, for example, experts on nuclear waste and radiation risk would say that the nuclear waste risk is small, but with other radiation risks not connected with nuclear waste or nuclear technology, for example, radon risk or natural background radiation risk, they will make a rating which is very similar to the one made by people from the public. So it's the field of responsibility. Anyway, you have very dramatic differences between experts and the public. Here you see risk of genetically modified food, experts and the public, tremendous difference. Overall attitude to the use and development of genetically modified food, tremendous difference between experts and the public. Here is not genetically modified food, but sort of traditional or normal food risks, and you see that the big difference between experts and the public is with additives, pesticides, environmental toxins. That is things that experts presumably feel that they have some responsibility for, but too much fat in foods, cooking, bacteria in foods is not something they feel they have responsibility for, and you have no difference between experts and the public. I think I skipped that one. It's interesting to see that female and male experts seem to give quite similar ratings, and you have the difference between experts and the public both for female and male experts, and if you look at the two groups